So again, as a little review, my guiding principles are that CVI is fundamentally different than ocular causes of visual impairment. The CVI range is a functional vision assessment for children with CVI. It replaces the functional vision assessment traditionally used for children with ocular causes. Children with CVI require specialized methods for identification, assessment, and intervention. That functional vision improvements are facilitated, not automatic, and that no child is too brain injured to see. Just as, again, a brief review, with ocular causes of visual impairment, the damage is in the structures of the eye, whereas the causes for CVI are in the brain. With CVI, there is an expectation, an ongoing expectation of improving vision. With ocular, static visual status, and sometimes even decreasing vision. Vision is evaluated by acuity measures for ocular forms of visual impairment, but acuity is a meaningless construct. It is a very, very unreliable construct for children with CVI where function, the measure of function, actually dominates. So, you see a picture of a kaleidoscope here, and I have this image here because I think most of us have often wondered, how does a child with CVI view the world? How do they see? And I have a quote here from a person I met in 2013, an adult who was born with CVI, and she says, it's what people call a kaleidoscope. In other words, a meaningless, random, maybe even interesting pattern of color and image and shape. But if I look at this image of a kaleidoscope and someone says, what is that called? What is that picture called? Other than kaleidoscope, I don't really have any names for what those pieces are. Or, as you see in this image, is it the inability to detect salient defining features? So is it just a kaleidoscope, a complex array? It's more than that. It's also the ability to even detect the pieces of the environment that have meaning. Salient features, or those defining features, make a series of fragmented colors and patterns into an integrated image, as you see here. So this image, I'm going to go back a slide, is actually the assembly of these disintegrated pieces. The individual with CVI perceives the pieces. So in this slide, you see a bag of all kinds of little circular dots. They could be candies, they could be confetti. They're all just multicolored dots. They could become something, but at this moment, they're just all gathered together and they don't form a stable image. So the individual perceives these pieces, but does not have the visual schemes, the stored representations, to provide context and meaning, so they don't know what they're looking at. They haven't developed images of the world that can be retrieved when something novel is seen and then compared the novel to what is known. It's all just a lot of pieces. And you see here in this slide that those pieces, all those little dots, could be represented in this pointillism image that many of us would be familiar with. But really, if you take all of those little points of paint and separate them out and line them up on a table, or dry them out and put them in a bag, you would have an image like the one you just saw, which is just a series of disjointed colored dots. So children with CVI have a very primitive search engine. Their cognitive ability to actually go through all kinds of representations of the world is very limited, because the world to them looks like those fragmented pieces, like those dots in a bag, like the kaleidoscope. They don't know how to shape it into something meaningful. They have been unable to access information because they have not actually stored meaningful information to start. It's all just a kaleidoscope. So this is really a disability of access. How does the child access their world in a meaningful way when, without your help, it's all just disjointed? It is a disability of access, though it's almost a counterintuitive concept. If many children with CVI have a normal eye exam or a nearly normal eye exam that doesn't explain why they're visually impaired in their eyes, we have to understand that we have to go way beyond the eyes. And again, a review, I have to add this as well, because when we describe how children with CVI it's not just a kaleidoscope, it's not just fragmented pieces that can't be put together easily. It's also something else. It's that even some familiar images, when put together too closely, create a crowding phenomenon that I refer to as a fish and a frog. So I know what a fish is, and you see this image of a fish coming across. I know what a fish is, and in this next image, I know what a frog is. And if you've heard me tell this story before, you know that I had the experience of looking outside a window into our pond at our home, and I saw something that I could not identify. And I know what a fish is, I know what a frog is. But on the next slide, you'll see, I had never considered the concept of a fish in a frog. These two pieces had nothing to do with my acuity. Size plus distance, that wasn't the issue. What the problem was that I had never considered the novel image, to me novel, of a frog that was half eaten a fish. So I didn't know I couldn't interpret it. I had nothing to draw upon. It took a while until I really saw frogness and part of fishness and put it together in a new way, and now I would never fail to recognize a fish and a frog. But I had no scheme for this concept. I could not interpret what my acuity gave me. I perceived this target as a novel third thing. Neither fish nor frog put together. Now it's something that's neither fish nor frog in my mind. So it was a CVI moment. For an individual with CVI, everyday experiences can be subject to interpretation due to an ever, even subtly changing environment. Our job is to actually insert ourselves to make that different. So in this case, here's a subtle adjustment. Here's a picture of a toothbrush by itself. Many of you have seen this before. Here's a tube of toothpaste. Now, each of these items are presented on a plain background and might be very accessible to the child with CVI. But if someone who's not intentionally presenting these things in a certain way happens to then place the toothbrush on top of the tube of toothpaste, it becomes like a fish and a frog. That, like me, I'd never considered the concept, nor does a child with CVI have the automatic ability to separate these two things out, put them back together and say, ah, those two components are familiar. Crowding. This is about crowding. So interventions for individuals with CVI are meant to provide access to the kaleidoscope of meaningless color and pattern in a visual array. They are meant to make the pieces become a whole image, not just a bag full of color images, not just a table full of color and pattern that can't be put together. They are meant to meaningfully modify a crowded visually complex view of targets. So it really matters that toothbrush was on top of the toothpaste. For some kids at some levels of CVI, not all. Providing interventions. So here's the critical piece. We, educators, therapists, parents, become the environmental engineers who remove the target from the kaleidoscope and place it in front of a neutral background. So we are the people who are responsible to imagine how this child sees the world and then to modify it so that the child has access. We are the mediators. We stand between the child and the event, the child and the activity, the child and the materials or object. We teach the child the salient defining features so that the child can generalize the known to the novel. So our job is to be very powerful in that child's life, to not just wait and see, but rather to imagine why this child may not be responding and then adapt it, and not just adapt the environment, but to proactively, intentionally provide information that helps support that child understand what they're seeing and build these visual schemes and representations of the world. So how does a child look at this picture of sort of three images? You see that there is an image of all kinds of birds. all kinds of birds, an owl, an ostrich, a hen, a chick, a seagull. Those of us who've had vision since birth would recognize immediately that these are all birds because we have a deeply seated, integrated knowledge of the salient feature of birdness. That has to be taught to a child with CVI. You see in the upper right that there are versions, different fonts used of the word cup, showing the highlighting that would be used to help the child see the salient features of that sight word, and then helping them generalize to a novel version of that same word and knowing the rules for that word remain true. And finally, you see an image at the bottom. This is an image that was shared with me by a little boy, a mom of a little boy in England who was teaching her child how to really recognize novel images. And you see here that she has used a book about a tiger, and there are illustrations about tiger, but she's also paired that with a photographic image of the tiger, a three-dimensional object of a tiger toy, and some other pieces that have to do with the story, thus helping him begin to generalize that this salient feature doesn't just belong to this picture, it belongs to everything we call tiger. Visual impairment places every area of human development at risk, and I cited Dave Warren for this. He's been pulling together the research around visual impairment for many years and has collected information that lets us know as vision educators and others that actually visual impairment has a comprehensive effect, or at least places all other areas of human development at risk. So for example, joint attention, that ability to look at something, I notice the child looking at something and then I talk about it, explain it, expand about it, supports receptive language, which supports learning, social development, and of course cognition. How does that start? It starts through the eyes. The problem for children with CVI and other forms of visual impairment grows and potentially snowballs. I think kids with CVI are at special risk, especially since CVI is not well understood by everyone. And I think a lot of people are unclear about how a child could actually have a typical eye exam or near typical and yet not understand the world around them. Emerson Folk, another vision researcher, said in 1982 that children with visual impairment need environmental redundancy. They need to experience something over and over and over before it begins to actually be well understood. But my suggestion is that it's more than just redundancy, that we adults without CVI, we powerful people in the lives of these children, need to be the mediator who stands between the child and the experience and not just gives the child the experience, but actually notices what the child notices, verifies what the child is seeing. Yes, you're right. I see you're noticing that red balloon. That red balloon is like the one you have at home except not shiny. So verifying, expanding, using comparative language to help explain. Compares that novel thing to the thing the child knows, so they now have a springboard to expand their visual representations and think, oh, balloon isn't just the thing in my bedroom. And we also help to build and expand the visual, language, and learning aspects of these schemes. For children with CVI, exposure to the visual world is never enough. And I have a quote here to put my glasses on. It came from Nancy Andreessen in The Secrets of the Creative Brain. It comes from the Atlantic, the July-August 2014 edition. And this is an article that talks about the creative brain, and I found this quote to be really important in terms of setting the stage for talking about strategies and interventions. And she quotes, I quote her, "As you read a word on a page or a screen, they register as black lines on a white background in your primary visual cortex. If the process stopped at that point, you wouldn't be reading at all. To read, your brain, through miraculously complex processes that scientists are still figuring out, needs to forward these black letters onto association cortex regions such as the angular gyrus so that the meaning is attached to them, and then onto language association regions in the temporal lobes so that the words are connected, and I highlighted this part, not only to one another, but also to their associated memories and given richer meanings. If children with CVI don't have those associated memories, those visual schemes, the words are just falling flat. It's a very fragile kind of learning. So in this image you see a setup where a child has a little toy set, and they've actually set up their own little version of this zoo exactly the way it was represented on the box. This is imitation, and children with CVI don't easily benefit from imitation. They need you, again, to be that mediator. So stored memories, visual and language schemes, and imitation are powerful tools for children without CVI. For children with CVI, we have to help them develop these intentionally. So I'm going to suggest that we please not use a wait-and-see approach. Do not use generic lightbox and pom-pom approach where you think, I have some CVI materials, so this must be what we need. That we have to start with the child's CVI range score and be highly intentional. Do not offer isolated therapies that fail to consider the impact of CVI on the child's learning. This isn't about vision time. Remember that what we do or fail to do will have an impact on that child's cognition and, in fact, their future. That we found in, when my husband and I published some findings from Pediatric View, our project at West Penn Hospital in Pittsburgh, published in 2010, that there is no relationship between the cause of CVI, what happened to your brain to cause CVI, and the outcome of measurably improved vision. In other words, CVI range scores from phase 1 to phase 3. That it looks like when we actually provide the right supports, it's more important that we do that than focus on, oh, this is what caused your injury or your brain condition. That implies that no child is too brain affected to improve functional vision or to have access to their world and to learn. A word about intelligence or IQ abilities, they are unknown. It is an unknown construct for children with CVI until the child has gained access to information in a meaningful and generalized way. IQ scores are extremely unreliable for children with CVI, and I usually suggest to families that they try to work with their school district to find an alternative way to describe their child's needs, because the IQ, in my experience, almost always scores lower than most people who know the child believe their abilities really are. That the interventions are based on the principles of visual plasticity and critical periods of visual learning as described by Hubel and Wiesel and many others, and that new neural pathways can be developed and visual function can be increased. I show again this image of the motile tip of a young neuron's burgeoning axon. This is the image I hold in my mind as I see a child visually alert to something, or maybe for the first time show a fixation response where we only saw kind of a localization before that. I imagine in my mind the activity, the excitement of these neurons in the brain that are waking up, branching out, reaching out, connecting to other neurons, creating pathways and ultimately new functions. It's really happening at that level. When we next get together, we'll talk specifically about beginning interventions through each of the phases. Thank you.